Well, Elon Musk is now the richest person on the planet.
More than half the satellites in space are owned and controlled by one man.
Well, he's a legitimate super genius. I mean, legitimate.
He says he's always voted for Democrats, but this year it will be different. He'll vote Republican.
There is a reason the U.S. government is so reliant on him.
Elon Musk is a scam artist, and he's done nothing.
Anything he does is fascinating to people.
Good afternoon and welcome to Elon Inc. We're coming to you this Thursday with, and this is where you hear the big air horn playing, an emergency podcast, an emergency edition of Elon Inc. I'm Max Chafkin, here with my colleague Ted Mann, Bloomberg reporter covering money and influence in Washington. And we're talking about the latest political earthquake that basically went off early yesterday morning, maybe late on, Tuesday night. So Elon Musk, just to catch everyone up, Elon Musk has tweeted something like 150 times about a spending package that congressional Republicans had, I think, thought they'd found a deal. It turns out they don't have the deal. As of noon today, it seems like this spending bill is dead. The government may be shutting down, and Ted is here to basically tell us what it means. Ted, thanks for coming on Elon Inc.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So, Ted, just to kick things off, tell me what Elon has been up to for the last 36 hours.
Just repeated public posts about this bipartisan spending bill, basically dredging up every single right-wing talking point against it to say it's a terrible deal and that any Republican who votes for it, in other words, votes for the Republican Speaker of the House's bill, should pay the price at the ballot box. And in no time, basically, he killed what had seemed like an almost certain to pass piece of legislation.
Yeah, let's just run through some of the problems. Off the top of my head, I remember there seemed like actually like a pretty modest potential pay increase for members of Congress that would only, because of the Constitution, would actually only go into effect like in 2026. What else?
Right.
What else has he brought up as sort of reasons for wanting to kill this bill and potentially shut the government down?
Some of it was this really classic sort of pull out a single line from a spending bill kind of to attack the pork barrel, stuff about the, food inspections of molasses came up. The fact that there's a deal in there to trade some federal land to the city of Washington, D.C. because they want to do a big giveaway and build a football stadium for the local football team. Just sort of random assortment of nouns and proper nouns that you can get if you want to make any spending bill in history look bad, which is basically just kind of delving into the line items and saying, look at this thing and what a giveaway it is.
So this blows my mind, really, because I'm old enough to remember, and when I say old enough, I mean more than 6 weeks old. Like, I'm old enough to remember when we thought that maybe Elon Musk would have no power or effectively no power within the sort of Trump administration or the Trump orbit. And now, like, all of a sudden, he looks like, some combination of the House leader of the Freedom Caucus and what is he like? How did this happen so quickly? Or do you have any read on like what role he's actually playing and really like how much of this is he doing this on his own and how much of it is sort of maybe at that behest of Trump?
I'm leaving the second part of that for the end because we don't know the answer. But for the beginning of that question, it's really good. And the quickest answer I have is something that I was texting about with a Trump person yesterday afternoon. And this guy was saying, this is a Trump-affiliated person who has always been kind of skeptical of the whole Doge thing because it's not really a government department and they're not going to have formal government authority. But what this person said to me was like, look, this is what they're actually going to be good at. Publicly shaming members of Congress, getting them off of a position, basically just using the power of the platform that Musk has. And the fact that they can sort of speak as such close allies of Trump that you kind of are worried about getting crosswise with MAGA if you don't do what Elon is telling you to do. And I think that's going to be, at least in the short term, that seems to be the sort of flex that he has available to him. And this first attempt to use it has worked resoundingly well. The second part of your question, though, is the main thing that I think everyone needs to know. Is this something that Musk was doing at Trump's behest? Is this something alternatively where he went rogue and got way out ahead of Trump, and Trump is now seeing that it's to his advantage to kind of go in the direction where Musk was already rowing.
Mike Johnson seems to have just, tell me if I'm wrong, it seems like Johnson has basically gone along with this. Like Musk, over the course of these tweets, was able to muster, and this is, I suppose, what's very stunning, just able to muster like a huge amount of public outrage and support and basically whip up a bunch of voters and activists and ultimately like members of Congress. And Johnson just backed down, right? I mean, he's basically said, okay, this bill that I supported it's dead now.
I think that's right, although I think even more of a preliminary surrender on the part of Musk and his entire conference, right? As soon as the Musk tweets started happening, they immediately tucked their tails and were no longer for the bill. We didn't even get to see them test whether or not their constituents actually care about funding to see if there's poison in the molasses. Like we didn't even get to that stage. It's more just that they see this guy with this giant platform everyone pays attention to, who is a giant benefactor of the president's, saying something that they should or shouldn't do, and they immediately fell into line, much more so than they would if Johnson said it.
You brought up the molasses twice now. Like, is this is the issue? This is why we're gonna government workers are not going to get paid because we wanted to test the molasses, or what?
Do you remember? No, it's just such a classic fiscal conservative move. Like, there's always an attempt to like comb through the budget every year, and there's funding for like studying the emotional, reasoning of the macaca monkey somewhere. Like there will always be some little line item that can be made to look ridiculous. And so in a way, it's like Musk doing a very classic Washington thing. But usually that's like a 2-minute speech on the House floor, and then they pass the bill to fund the government anyway. Instead, in this case, he just sort of made a big deal out of all this sort of conventional stuff. And they, apparently are using it to tank what had been a surefire deal.
I want to get to the politics of this and how it might play out in a second. But just before we get there, can you just explain or try to explain what it would mean if they don't reach a deal? I mean, Musk has said basically, and I'm sure House Republicans and I'm sure everyone is okay with this. He's basically said, if the government shuts down and doesn't operate until January 20th, no big deal. That might even be better. And I assume that's not true and that's causing a minor freak out. But I'd love to sort of, if you could try to understand why, or if he has it wrong. Like, if the government shuts down, what would happen?
I mean, the short answer is that it doesn't all shut down at once, but that you would start to see, damage right away, in the sense of the classic example, obviously, is payments to the troops. And there are things that the government would do to try to sort of slow the pain and deflect the pain as long as you can. But basically, a government shutdown starts to hit the whole economy. It's not like it just upsets a few white-collar bureaucrats who work in D.C.
Well, and a bunch of people don't get paid, right?
Right. You don't get paid. A bunch of federal agencies that are considered non-essential stop doing the work that they do, and that starts to ripple into the private sector too. I think Trump said this morning, apparently, I believe it was to a TV outlet, that he's very confident that Biden will be blamed because this will have technically started on his watch. And I think that's a real gamble for them because everyone knows who did it. It was Musk and Trump, not Biden. And so I think this assumption that just because it started while Biden was still on the clock and then therefore the public won't be mad about the effects is a pretty big political gamble by both Musk and Trump.
I mean, it just feels like this is a problem for Trump. Now, all of a sudden, he's like he's formed an alliance with this like essentially rogue actor who is very, very, very powerful, who also maybe doesn't understand how government works and is willing nonetheless to try to impose himself on the next administration. Like, is this I feel like there's a story where that's an asset, and there's also a story where there's a vulnerability, and would love to hear kind of both of those, or kind of how each scenario could play out over the coming months, and even I guess over the holiday.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the potential benefit to Trump is that he has benefited in the past with more chaos in the system, sort of the disruption of the norms, and there's this classic Washington entropy that usually like takes hold, and like eventually we all agree we got to pass the bill to fund the government. But Trump, in having promised again to shake up everything in the short term, could benefit by everything being shaken up. I think if they actually do get to the point of a government shutdown, and then it is a wholly Republican responsibility when Hakeem Jeffries is going to sort of not come bail you out, then it's on them to strike a deal with a very narrow majority in the House. And this
Hakeem Jeffries being the minority, the Democratic leader.
The Democratic leader, who, even though like Trump is saying things that Democrats usually like get rid of the debt ceiling, right now they feel like we had a deal, you blew it up, you fixed it. And they don't feel any, we've seen this before from them, like when McCarthy fell in his speakership. There will be these times where they decide it's not to our political benefit to come bail you out because you can't control your conference. And I do feel like if that situation were to be prolonged and start to drag on, and then Donald Trump and Elon Musk don't have a magical solution to that, that's where you could start to see political damage to Trump in the long term.
All right, Ted Mann, we will stay in touch on this, I'm sure. Hope you have a great holiday, and let's talk again in the new year. I'm sure we're going to have to tackle these issues in greater depth, no matter what happens. But pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, next week we will be joined by Ryan Broderick of Garbage Day. It'll be part of a special 2-part holiday series of episodes. This episode was produced by Magnus Hendrickson. Anna Mazarakis is our editor, and Rayhan Harmansi, our senior editor. The idea for this very show also came from Rayhan. Blake Maples handles engineering, and Emma Sanchez fact-checks. The Elon Inc. theme is written and performed by Taka Yasuzawa and Alex Seguiera. Brendan Francis Newnham is our executive producer, and Sage Bauman is the head of Bloomberg Podcasts. A big thanks to Joel Weber and Brad Stone. I'm Max Chafkin. If you have a minute, rate and review our show. It'll help other listeners find us. And we will see you next week.